And now we're going to need a bigger boat. All this talk of a falling birth rate and a need to rely more heavily on immigration to keep our economy afloat sounds like a recipe for disaster. In Britain, parts of the country have been changed irrevocably since the Blair regime opened up the country to foreign workers and their families. And even as we speak, communities around the country are being forcibly altered as more and more migrants are being housed in more and more residential areas. Yesterday, the Home Office proudly declared that the number of asylum seekers staying in hotels is down 36% in the last 6 months. They claim that by the end of the month, 100 hotels will have been returned to their ordinary use. And if their asylum claims had failed and they were all being deported, that might be something to boast about. But that's not what's happening. A grand total of 50 people were deported last week, just 50. They are simply being moved out of hotels and into rented accommodation, and we, I'm afraid, are footing the bill. More and more private landlords are applying for HMO status, that's houses of multiple occupancy, in order to rent them out to asylum seekers. It's happening up and down the country, and meanwhile, thousands more are arriving on small boats by the week. Welcome to your future. Now, speaking of asylum, Downing Street has declared a migration emergency after the busiest day for channel crossings so far this year. The Home Office revealed on Wednesday that more than 500 migrants made the journey, with 10 boats detected in the water. Let's bring in tonight's special panel, editor of Spikes Online Tom Slater, political analyst Alice Grant, and journalist and broadcaster Sam Dowler. Very warm welcome to all of you. What a day. I mean, there's been so much going on today that has been more negative for Rishi Sunak. We haven't even mentioned there that the Tories have now reached their lowest point this year so far, back down to 19% where they were when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. And then we get the news that more than 500 people have come over in one fell swoop because the weather's rather nice and it's just going to get worse. So I don't see how they can even go till Easter, this lot, never mind till October.
I'd be amazed. I mean, especially when you think about how central stopping the boats was to Rishi Sunak's whole programme. This is how he was going to rescue his chances, rescue his party's chances. And did anyone really think he was going to get a grip on it? He never really seemed to
only he
willing
he
to
was
do
the
what
only
was
one that thought he was going to do it, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And now this is another pledge that lies in tatters. The only pledge that they've managed to fulfil is the one that everyone knew would happen anyway, which is inflation coming down. So,
which has got nothing to do with them.
Absolutely. Right. So it's not looking good for them, definitely.
It really isn't. Alice?
Yeah, I think this is perceived as enormously weak, not just within Britain, but on the international stage. I mean, we're a country who can't seem to control our borders, and anyone serious about the economy, as Rishi Sunak claims to be, would be very concerned for our welfare state, which is at its breaking point, really, with the NHS.
Well, this is the thing. We talk about this a lot, and we've got 9 million people now who are economically inactive, some of them because they're students, but most of them because they're not working. Some of them have never worked. And I don't know how any government, including a Labour government, if possible, that's the next one, I don't know how they get those people to work.
Yeah, precisely. There is a crisis, but I think the most important thing is that this is something which was so central to the Brexit vote. It was about control over our territory, our waters, our laws, and none of these promises have been adequately fulfilled since then. Right. We're still tied economically to the EU in certain respects. We're still having problems just controlling and policing our seas. I mean, this is ridiculous. They need to step up. But, I mean, at the moment, I think they've lost that chance, and now we're going to face 10 years of a Labour government in which all these problems will become worse. And it's a real heartbreak for our country.
I think so. I'm going to be making an argument later on in this hour, Sam, that the Conservative Party, actually, as we know it, is finished.
Well, I mean, like Alice just said, I don't think it's time for them to step up. I think it's time for them to step down, really. I mean, there's an argument to be said that calling a general election sooner rather than later will mean that they can palm all the problems that are currently going on that's straight onto Labour and say, like, oh, look, you can't deal with immigration. Right. You've been in power for, like, 2 months.
It's not very patriotic, though, is it? To just hand a horrible, nasty...
No, it isn't. But, I mean, let's be honest, they're not going to be able to change things at this point. Obviously, immigration is illegal immigration is a thorn in their side. And, and as the weather gets better, it's just going to get worse and worse. And suddenly they're going to be back in the hotels again, and people are going to be up in arms. So, I mean, there's no other real excuse other than to call a general election sooner rather than later.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I put out this tweet, actually, funnily enough, during the show yesterday, because I spotted it from the Home Office, that the reduction in people being put up in hotels is, it's gone down by 36%. And I just asked the question, well, I wonder where they've gone. Because obviously they haven't been deported. We've only deported 50 people, all of whom were criminals, so presumably they were in prison, and then when they got freed from prison, they were simply sent back home. So they're basically going into... And I got such an incredible response from people who watch this show and listen to this show. from all parts of Britain saying, oh, yes, in our street we've got, 2 houses that have been made into multiple occupancy. They've now got asylum seekers in them. Instead of 6-bedroom house, it's now a 10-bedroom, multiple occupancy unit. And it's happening from sort of Lowestoft up to Glasgow, down to Exeter. Everywhere in the country, these people are being distributed. I even heard a story today that Westminster Council is actually putting people up in some rather swanky addresses around the back of St James's. And that not only are they being put up there, families of people who have come here seeking asylum, but they're, every day something new arrives for them. It's a new fridge or is a new cooker or some kind of white goods coming from John Lewis. I mean, it's a racket. People are not going to put up with this.
It's terribly unjust.
And it's also just so superficial, though, because that's one thing. They were like, we need to get a grip on the hotels because everyone's heard about how much it's costing. People were seeing it in their local community. The place that is not only the employer, but the wedding venue is suddenly out of bounds. So we've got to do something about it. But as you said, they just moved the problem around. It's a bit like the Rwanda scheme. Even if everything went perfectly to plan from here on out, which is inconceivable, frankly, because of how they handled it so far, even if everything went perfectly to plan, you're talking about a few hundred people being taken to Rwanda. It's purely symbolic at this point, but symbolism is all they've got left, it seems like.
Symbolism is all they've got left, and Rwanda seems to be all they've got left, and they even have worked out that there's no point in trying to get that through the Houses of Parliament before Easter because they know it's probably not going to work, so they don't want to get defeated now. They think they'd rather get defeated later.
It was a white elephant from the start. It was never going to work, and obviously it was so much money being given to the Rwandan government, and we haven't seen a single plane get taken off. And like you said, even if it had gone through, it still would have been minimal amounts. So what was the point of it all? Other than to pile further embarrassment on the Tory party?
Well, all that seems to have happened is we've given Rwanda a load of money, which they've said, thank you very much indeed. It might not be enough, but it's a good start. Literally, that's
so embarrassing.
It's ridiculous.
I can't believe to think they had an 80-seat majority with Boris.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
And they totally squandered it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no excuse for this. It's just shocking. And, the only thing that makes me feel less embarrassed is that actually it seems that it's not our country which is incapable of being incompetent as well, but also apparently many others across Europe and America too. But what is going on in politics? Something needs to change because this is unacceptable.
Well, I mean, when we see as well in this new poll, I mean, Labour 25 points ahead of the Tories, but Reform only 4 points behind. I mean, that's got to worry them as well, isn't it?
It really should. But I'd be amazed if they were so surprised. First of all, how dreadful things have been for so long. But also, as impressive as that 80-seat majority was, it was always kind of slightly fragile as far as it's a new coalition. Do they really trust you? Yet you've got to deliver for them.
Right.
Things have got really volatile
most of
now.
the people
are
voted
shopping
to
around.
get Brexit done.
Absolutely.
And Brexit didn't get done.
And people in the Red Wall were taking a risk. They were thinking, I've never voted Tory my whole life. I might just do this, which is obviously the Red Wall is going to collapse instantly as soon as there's a general election. So I mean, they'll lose 80. They'll lose those 80 seats
collapse
straight
for the
away.
Tories, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I don't know whether Labour gets it back though, because Reform could do an awful lot better than everybody thinks.
I think it's quite plausible that Labour could win a lot of those seats back by default because of the fact that not only does the Tory vote collapse, they'll lose some to Reform. I think a lot of those working class voters in particular are probably going to go back to not voting. They're just sick of the lot of them. So I think even if Labour win very handsomely next time around, it's also going to be fragile because of the fact that everyone knows no one's enthusiastic for Keir Starmer.
Right.
I think the real pain here is the loss of momentum that was created because of Brexit.
Yeah.
There was such a lot of hope, a hope of an empowered future for Britain, one in which we were in control, we had our sovereignty back. There was so much we can do with that.
Absolutely.
And instead of pursuing, a positive vision for Britain, what they've done is they've effectively
they botched
squandered
it, didn't they? I mean, and I accept that, COVID didn't exactly help. But I remember, when that sort of January 31st came around, 2021, or 2020, I suppose it was, wasn't it? The Brexit vote was in 2019. So, end of January. And, I went to a party. It was very, there was a lot of sort of hope. There was a lot of happiness. And people were like, this is going to be great, actually. We can do all these things. And then suddenly COVID came. And then it all got botched. And I think Northern Ireland is a good example of where it all went wrong, where you've now got Sinn Féin in charge of the local assembly, who are going to push for a united Ireland. And, before the end of, maybe the decade, you're going to see a possible vote in Ireland for a united Ireland, which may result in the breakup of the United Kingdom.
But you could see a United Kingdom that was Wales and England.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
You know, if they let's say Scotland votes out as well. And
I don't think they will. But I mean, if Ireland goes,
we're going to call ourselves.
But if Ireland, yeah, exactly, it's bad use of royal family as well, because you know they'll only be the king of England.
I think Scotland is safe so long as Humza Yousaf remains in power, though.
Yes.
He's the sort of double agent for the union.
Yeah, I mean, he has managed to turn the SNP into a real force against independence, isn't it? Which is fantastic.
Hell of a job. Yeah.
He's done terribly well.
We love you, Humza.
Because you know no Labour or Tory politician could manage to do that, but he's managed to do it. He's managed to make the SNP a party actually, you know, that will never achieve independence. But I mean, it's bad news if Northern Ireland goes because you know that's effectively quite a large chunk of the union, isn't it?
No, it's shocking.
But also, like I have a lot of Northern Irish friends. I mean, there was a great swathes, millions of people that don't want to be don't want a unified Ireland.
No, of course.
You know, they want to remain.
Well, that's why Northern Ireland's there.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I think, you know, like unlike Alice, who thinks it's going to be 10 years of hell with Keir Starmer, I do think that we have to try and be positive. I mean, I would say I was a centrist, and I've voted for both sides, but I think, you know, they've made such a terrible job of it. I don't see how it could possibly get worse. I mean, don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that this time next
Bring me back in about a year's time to go, look, I told you it was getting worse.
When I wear my flak jacket to get inside the building.